My son sent me a text message at 11:14 on the Tuesday night. I was in the kitchen, couldn't sleep, heating up leftover soup. The phone was on the counter and I almost didn't look at it. Almost. Dad, Brooke and I have been talking. This isn't working anymore. You need to find your own place. We need our space. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I set down my spoon, read it again, then a third time. Then I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. Right in the chest, the way only your own child can hurt you. But I smiled because I recognized the handwriting, so to speak. That phrasing, don't make this harder than it has to be. That wasn't my son. My son used to call me every Sunday just to talk about baseball. That sentence came from somewhere else. Someone else. I turned off the stove, poured the soup down the drain, and went to bed. I didn't sleep, but I went to bed. My name is Howard Greer. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer in Charlotte, North Carolina, retiring in 2019 with a decent pension, some savings, and a house I'd owned outright since 2011. 3 bedrooms, a workshop in the basement, and a garden I'd been expanding every spring since my wife passed. The house on Caldwell Road is nothing fancy from the street, but I know every nail in it. I put half of them in myself. My son Caleb is 35. He was a good kid, curious, hardworking, made decent choices most of his life. He met Brooke at a work conference 4 years ago. She was in marketing, had a polished way of talking, always knew the right thing to say in any room. I noticed early on that she had 2 different versions of herself. The version she performed for people she needed something from, and the version that surfaced when no one was watching. I didn't say anything. Caleb was happy. Who was I to interfere with that? They got married 18 months later. I paid for the rehearsal dinner, contributed to the honeymoon, didn't ask to be repaid. That's just what fathers do. 6 months after the wedding, Brooke lost her job. Restructuring, she said. The whole department eliminated. Caleb was working as a project coordinator, making around $58,000 a year. They were renting an apartment across town for $1,450 a month. With Brooke out of work, the math got tight fast. Caleb called me on a Sunday, still calling then, still doing that, and asked if they could stay with me temporarily. Just until Brooke found something. 2 months, maybe 3. I said yes without hesitating. Of course I did. He's my son. That was 26 months ago. Brooke found another job after about 6 weeks. Digital marketing manager. Decent salary. She never told me exactly what she made, but based on the car she leased, I'd estimate 60, maybe 65,000. Caleb got a raise 6 months in. Between them, they were pulling in well over 100,000 a year. And every month I paid the mortgage on a house they were living in rent-free, plus utilities, plus the groceries they ate without offering to chip in. I want to be fair here. The first year wasn't terrible. Caleb helped with yard work sometimes. There were Sunday dinners that felt like family. Brooke kept the common areas clean, mostly. There were normal moments. But Brooke had a way of expanding into space. Small at first. Her home office took over the guest room. Her skincare products filled 2 shelves in the hall bathroom. Her opinions about the kitchen filled every conversation that touched on food. Howard, do you really need the coffee maker on the counter? It clutters the whole space. That was my coffee maker. I'd had it for 11 years. I moved it into a cabinet and started making coffee in the morning, like someone sneaking around in their own house. The comments about the workshop bothered me most. She called it the dungeon. Not to my face at first. Then openly, Caleb, your dad's been in the dungeon for 3 hours. Can you check on him? Said lightly, laughed off. But I heard what she meant. Old man in the basement tinkering with his junk. I restore furniture down there. Antique pieces, mostly chairs and side tables. I find them at estate sales, bring them back. There's a 1908 rocking chair in the corner that I spent 4 months on. It's beautiful now. Brooke asked once if I was going to sell it. I said no. She looked at me like I was confirming something she already suspected. About a year in, things shifted. Brooke stopped being polite in the way she'd been polite before. There's a difference between warmth and performance, and when performance stops being necessary, it just stops. She started speaking to me like I was a guest who'd overstayed. We were going to have friends over Saturday, so... So what? So make yourself scarce. We were thinking of redoing the back deck. My deck. Caleb went along with it. Not cruelly. He'd look at the floor during these conversations, shift his weight, change the subject. He never sided with me out loud, but he never sided with me out loud, but he never sided with me at all. 8 months ago, something good happened to me. I joined a woodworking club that met Thursday evenings at a community center in Concord. It was my neighbor Dawn who dragged me there. 12 people, folding chairs, somebody always brought bad coffee. I loved it immediately. There was a woman named Janet who made intricate jewelry boxes, precise and beautiful. We started talking after the 3rd meeting. By the 6th, we were getting dinner afterward. Janet is 61, retired pharmacist, sharp sense of humor, grew up in rural Virginia, and has no patience for pretension of any kind. She made me feel like myself again, like a person with opinions and history and something to offer, not a liability who'd outlived his usefulness. I mentioned her at home, casually, the way you do. Brooke's reaction was immediate and strange. Not angry, that came later, but something almost proprietary, like I'd announced a change to household arrangements without consulting her. Oh, you're seeing someone. Not a question. A recalibration. 2 weeks later, I invited Janet to dinner. Just dinner. Just the 4 of us. Nothing formal. I mentioned it that morning. Brooke set down her mug very deliberately. I don't think that's a great idea right now, Howard. The house is a mess. We've had a long week. The house wasn't a mess. The week had been ordinary. I'd like to have a friend over for dinner, I said. In my house. Our house, she said, quietly, like a correction she'd been holding on to. That was the moment. That was when I knew exactly where things stood and where they were heading. Caleb came in from the hall. He'd heard. I looked at him and waited. He looked at Brooke, then at me. Then maybe we just pick a better time, Dad. She's been stressed. I picked up my keys and went to Janet's. That night, sitting at her kitchen table with tea and her 2 ridiculous cats weaving between our feet, I told her what happened. She listened all the way through without interrupting, which is rarer than people realize. So, what are you going to do? She asked. I've been thinking about that for a while, I said. I think it's time to stop thinking. I didn't sleep well that night, but not from distress, from clarity. There's a version of sleeplessness that comes from anxiety, and a version that comes from decision. This was the second kind. The next morning, I was in my workshop at 7 a.m. when my phone buzzed. Caleb's text. The "don't make this harder than it has to be" text. I read it again in the daylight. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to Philip Owens. He's a real estate attorney I'd worked with on easement disputes back in my engineering days. Solid, precise, no nonsense. I hadn't called him for anything personal before. I sent a text. Philip, I need to meet this week. Property matter. Some urgency. He responded before I'd finished my second cup of coffee. Thursday, 10 a.m. My office. I put the phone down and went back to work on the chair I was refinishing. Walnut frame, circa 1920s. Someone had painted over the original finish with beige house paint. An act of violence against good wood. I was undoing it, layer by layer, taking my time. Some repairs require patience. You can't rush the stripper, or you damage what's underneath. You have to let it work. I'd been letting things work for 2 years. Now it was time to see what was underneath. Before continuing, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you're watching from. I read every one. Thursday morning, Philip's office. Clean space, law books. A window overlooking a parking garage. He remembered me from the easement work, asked about retirement, settled in. I told him everything. 2 years. No lease. No payments. Combined income over 6 figures. My name on the deed. The mortgage paid off. Every utility bill in my name for 31 years. And a text from my son telling me to find somewhere else to live. Philip didn't look surprised. He looked like someone who'd heard every configuration of family and money and had stopped being surprised by any of it. You've been a de facto landlord providing free housing, he said. In North Carolina, that creates a month-to-month tenancy by operation of law. You can terminate it with proper written notice. 30 days is the standard. What does that look like? A formal notice to vacate, delivered in writing. I can draft it today if you want to move forward. He paused. I do have to ask. This is your son. My son told me to find somewhere else to live. I'm going to honor that request. Philip nodded. Then let's talk through the sequence. We spent an hour and a half mapping it out. The notice. The timeline. What happened if they refused? The legal process in Mecklenburg County. He pulled up statutes on his second monitor, talked me through every step. When we finished, he leaned back. You've clearly thought about this. For about 8 months, I said. I just needed someone to confirm I was reading the situation correctly. You are. I signed the engagement letter. Walked out into the October air. There's a particular feeling you get when you've made a decision you've been avoiding. Not relief exactly. More like the absence of a weight you'd normalized. Like taking off shoes you'd been wearing so long you forgot they were tight. That evening, I had dinner with Janet. I told her what I'd done. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. About time, she said. She was right. It was. The notice arrived at Caldwell Road by certified mail on a Tuesday. I was at the woodworking club when it landed. My phone started buzzing at 4:30 p.m. 6 calls from Caleb in 20 minutes. 2 from Brooke. I turned the ringer off and helped Janet troubleshoot a dovetail joint that wasn't sitting flush. I listened to the voicemails later in my truck. Caleb's first, Dad. What is this? Call me. Second. Seriously, Dad. This is insane. We need to talk. Brooks, the second one. The one she clearly recorded after having time to compose herself. Howard. I understand you're upset about the dinner situation, and I think we can work through that. But this feels like a dramatic overreaction. And we'd really like to sit down as a family. I deleted them all and drove home. Caleb was waiting in the living room. Brooke was in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, face very still. 30 days? Caleb said. You're giving us 30 days? Caleb said. That's standard for a month-to-month tenancy. Philip explained it in the letter. Who's Philip? My attorney. You got an attorney? Dad, we're your family. I sat down in my chair, the armchair by the window that no one ever sat in except me. I looked at my son. Caleb, you texted me and told me to find somewhere else to live. I'm giving you the same consideration you gave me, except I'm giving you 30 days and a letter instead of a Tuesday night text. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Brooke stepped forward. This is because of the woman, isn't it? This is about you wanting to move her in. This is about your telling me what to do in my own home for 2 years, and your husband sending me a text message asking me to leave. That's what this is about. We've been here 2 years. We've contributed to this household. How much rent have you paid? Silence. How much did you contribute to utilities, to the mortgage, to the property taxes? More silence. I have the records, I said. 2 years of bills. All in my name. All paid by me. I stood up. You have 30 days. I'd suggest using them productively. I went downstairs to my workshop. I could hear them above me, the floor creaking, her voice and his back and forth, the particular acoustics of an argument that can't find its footing because one side has already won. I picked up my sandpaper and got back to work. Over the next 10 days, the approaches shifted. Caleb tried reasonable first. Dad, we've been looking at apartments, and everything decent is going to require first and last and security deposit. We don't have that liquid right now. I said, you've had 2 years of rent-free living. With your income, that should have been savings, not spending. He didn't have an answer for that. Brooke tried conciliatory. She made dinner one night, set the table properly, poured wine, sat across from me with something on her face that was supposed to look like remorse. I know I haven't always made you feel welcome here, Howard, and I take responsibility for that. She paused, perfectly timed. But we're asking for more time. 60 days. Maybe 90. The notice is 30 days, I said. That's not changing. Her face changed under the performance, like weather moving behind glass. Then she tried a different angle. She started going through the house taking photographs. Subtle at first. I'd come into her room, and she'd quickly pocket her phone, then openly, almost defiantly, walking room to room with her phone out. I asked Philip about it. He said it was likely an attempt to document the property for some future dispute. Let her photograph, he said. It's your house. Everything in it is legally yours unless she can prove otherwise. She can't. 2 weeks before the deadline, I did something I'd been preparing for longer than the notice itself. I drove to 3 banks, too, where I held accounts Caleb and Brooke both knew about, and one where I'd quietly opened an individual account 18 months earlier, when I'd first started to see clearly where this was going. I restructured, moved savings, updated beneficiary designations, changed the security questions on 2 accounts I'd never mentioned to either of them. I also called my financial advisor and removed Caleb from the informal arrangement we'd had where he could see certain account summaries. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just paperwork, just the quiet administration of things that had always been mine. It took about a week for them to notice. Caleb brought it up carefully. Dad, I tried to check the account you used to let me see for emergencies, and I'm locked out. I reorganized my finances, I said. You have your own accounts. He looked at me for a long moment. You've already decided this is really happening? It's been really happening since the night you sent that text. He nodded slowly. Something moved across his face that wasn't anger. It looked closer to shame. I turned back to my breakfast. Janet asked me once during this period whether I felt guilty. We were sitting on her back porch, October becoming November, the air finally cool enough to be comfortable. Some, I said honestly. He's my son. You don't just stop feeling things, but guilt and obligation aren't the same. I can feel sad about this situation and still know it needed to happen. She nodded. We sat for a while without talking. One of her cats came and sat on my feet. He's going to be okay, she said. If he's half the person you describe, he's going to be okay. She said, if he's half the person you describe, he's going to be okay. I hoped she was right. The deadline came on a Thursday. I had arranged to stay at Janet's for the last week before it, partly to give them space to pack, partly because I didn't want to watch. Philip called that morning. They're still in the house. I'd expected it. Filed a complaint. Already drafted. I'll submit today. Given the clean paper trail, the judge is likely to rule within 3 weeks. Clear tenancy relationship. Proper notice. Documented non-payment. Textbook. Thank you, Philip. The court date was set for late November. I prepared my folder the same way I used to prepare for county project reviews. Methodically, completely, nothing left to chance. Deed. 31 years of mortgage statements. 2 years of utility bills. The original certified mail receipt. The text message from Caleb, printed and notarized. Brooke hired a lawyer. A young guy in a tight suit who argued hardship and reasonable expectation of continued tenancy and the emotional cruelty of displacing family. He was articulate. He was also working with almost nothing. The judge was a compact man in his late 60s who'd clearly heard every version of this story before. He asked Caleb directly, Mr. Greer, did you pay rent at any point during your 26 months of residence? No, Your Honor. But, did you contribute to utilities, mortgage, or property taxes? We helped around, financially. Yes or no? No, Your Honor. The judge reviewed my folder. He took his time. I watched him turn the pages and thought about the rocking chair in my basement, about layers of paint coming off to reveal good wood, about the patience required to do something right. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, he said. The defendants have 21 days to vacate the property at 2714 Caldwell Road. Failure to do so will result in sheriff-enforced removal. The gavel. Brooke made a sound like she'd been struck. Caleb put his arm around her, but his face had gone gray, the particular gray of someone who has understood something too late. Their lawyer requested an extension. The judge denied it. Proper notice was given and ignored. 21 days is more than adequate. Philip and I walked out into cold November air. Clean, he said simply. Yes, I said. We shook hands in the parking lot. I drove to Janet's, called her from the driveway. It's done, I said. Come inside, she said. I'm making soup. I sat in her kitchen and ate soup and didn't say much. She didn't push me to. Outside the window, dead leaves moved across the yard in the wind. I felt light. Not happy exactly. Something quieter. The feeling of a thing being honestly resolved. The following days had an aftermath I hadn't fully planned for, though I probably should have. Brooke called my sister in Nashville. My sister, who hadn't been involved in any of this, and gave her a version of events in which I had become cold and vindictive, throwing out my son over a misunderstanding about a dinner invitation. My sister called me, diplomatic and worried. I sent her the text from Caleb, the utility bills, the court ruling. She called me back 20 minutes later, quieter. She called you difficult. I know, I said. She's very convincing. She is, I said. But convenience and truth aren't the same thing. My sister exhaled. Are you okay? Better than I've been in 2 years. Caleb and Brooke moved out on day 18 of 21. I know because Philip had someone confirm it. They left some things. A broken vacuum. 2 boxes of Brooke's marketing materials. A lamp with a bent neck. They left the lamp on its side in the middle of the living room floor. A small act of spite that cost them nothing and told me everything. I filed an insurance note, had the carpets professionally cleaned, donated the boxes to a Goodwill, and threw away the lamp. Then I walked through my house, all of it, every room, slowly. The kitchen, where I'd started making coffee in a cabinet like a guest. The back deck she'd talked about redoing. The guest room that had become her office. The hallway bathroom, with its reclaimed shelf space. My workshop in the basement. The dungeon, where the rocking chairs still sat in the corner, waiting to be admired. I opened the workshop windows. Let the cold air in. Then I went upstairs and made a list of everything I wanted to do differently. Not revenge. Just reclamation. 3 months passed. I'm not going to pretend they were simple. I thought about Caleb every day. Worried about him in the specific, helpless way that doesn't stop just because someone hurt you. Fathers don't get to turn that off. I don't think they should. He called twice in November. I let both go to voicemail. They were short messages, not accusatory, just quiet and a little lost. He'd gotten an apartment in Kannapolis. He and Brooke were having problems. He didn't say that explicitly, but I could hear it in the space around his words. He was working the same job. He didn't ask for money. That registered. In December, I got a card in the mail. His handwriting, which I'd recognize anywhere, slightly cramped and listing left the way it always had since 3rd grade. Dad, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. I'm not going to. I just want to say I understand now what I should have said a long time ago, which is thank you for everything, for the house and the years before the house and everything I didn't see clearly. Brooke and I are separated. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I know I made choices. I'm just telling you because I think you'd want to know. I'm figuring things out. I hope you are too. I love you. Caleb. I read it at the kitchen table, twice. Set it down. Made coffee in my coffee maker, which was back on the counter where it belonged. I didn't call him. Not yet, but I didn't throw away the card either. I put it in the drawer in my workshop, next to the photos of the rocking chair before and after. By February, I'd made 2 decisions. The first was that I was going to list the house, not because it held bad memories. It holds good ones too, most of them from before. But because it was too large for one person, and the equity was enough to buy something smaller and better suited to who I am now, I found a place in Concord, 12 minutes from Janet, 8 from the woodworking club. A craftsman bungalow built in 1931 with original hardwood floors and a detached garage. I immediately began mentally converting to a proper workshop. The second decision was smaller, but felt significant. I called Caleb. He picked up on the second ring. There was a pause on both ends, the particular silence of 2 people figuring out who goes first. "Hey, Dad." "Hey." We talked for 45 minutes. I won't recount all of it. Some conversations are private in a way that doesn't survive retelling. But I'll say this. He sounded different. Quieter, less performed. He talked about therapy, about starting to understand some patterns in himself he hadn't seen clearly. He talked about his new apartment, small but his, about a coworker who'd become a friend, about how he'd started cooking real meals instead of relying on delivery. He didn't mention Brooke except once, briefly, to say the divorce was moving forward and that he thought it was the right thing. Toward the end, he said, "I know this doesn't fix anything." "No," I said, "but it's a start. Is there a way back from this? Between us?" I thought about that rocking chair, about the months of work to get the paint off, to get back to what the wood actually was, about how you can't rush it, and how the result isn't the same as the original, but is, in some ways, better. Honest, stripped of the things that didn't belong. "I think so," I said, but slowly. "And it's going to look different than before." "Okay," he said, "I can work with that." We didn't make plans. We just said goodbye and hung up. I sat in the kitchen for a while afterward. The clocks ticked. Outside, the February light was flat and pale, but it was there. The closing on the Concord bungalow was on a Friday in March. I signed the papers, got the keys, sat in the empty living room on the floor because there was no furniture yet, and ate a sandwich I'd packed and looked at the original trim around the windows, at the way the afternoon light came through the glass, at the floors that needed refinishing but had good bones. Good bones. That's what it comes down to, in houses and in people. Janet came by that evening with wine and 2 folding chairs, and we sat in the empty living room and toasted nothing in particular and everything in general. "How does it feel?" she asked. I looked around the room, thought about the workshop I built in the garage, the floors I'd refinish myself, the garden I'd start in the spring, the rocking chair I'd move over and put by the window where it could be properly seen. "Like the beginning of something," I said. She smiled. We sat there while the light faded and the room went quiet and the new house settled around us, doing what old houses do. Just breathing, just holding, just waiting for the people inside it to make it home. I've been in the bungalow 4 months now. The workshop is mostly finished. The floors in the living room are done. Took me 3 weekends, but they came out beautifully. That deep, warm color that good hardwood gets when you treat it right. I have 19 pieces of furniture in various stages of restoration. There's a 1940s writing desk I found at an estate sale in Gastonia that I think is going to be the best thing I've ever done. Caleb came for lunch last month. First time I'd seen him in person since before the notice. He looked thinner, a little tired, but clearer somehow. We ate at the small table in the kitchen, and he looked at the floors and said, "Dad, these are incredible." And I believed him. We didn't talk about Brooke. We didn't talk about Caldwell Road. Not directly. We talked about his new job. He's looking at a project manager position that would be a real step up. We talked about my bungalow, what I wanted to do with the garden. He asked about Janet. I told him a little. He nodded. Before he left, he stood in the front doorway and looked at me for a moment. "Thank you for calling," he said. "Thank you for picking up," I said. We didn't hug. That's not where we are yet. But he nodded. I nodded back, and I watched him walk to his car and drive away, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something like hope. I went back inside, put on coffee, went down to the workshop, picked up my sandpaper. The desk waited on the bench, patient as it had been patient for 80 years, asking only for someone willing to take their time and do it right. I got to work. If this story stayed with you, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And leave me a comment. I want to know where in the world you're listening from. I've thought a lot about what this whole thing actually was. Not the legal part. That was straightforward once I decided to move. I mean the years before it. The 2 years of small erosions I let happen because I told myself I was being patient, being a good father, being the bigger person. What I was actually being was afraid. Afraid that if I held a line, Caleb would pull away. So I didn't hold it. And he pulled away anyway, just more slowly, and in a direction I didn't see coming. That's the thing nobody tells you about choosing to absorb disrespect quietly. You think you're keeping the peace. What you're really doing is teaching people what you'll accept. And people learn that lesson fast. Even the ones who love you. Maybe especially them. Brooke didn't turn my son into someone cruel. That's too simple, and it lets him off too easy. What she did was find something already in him, a habit of taking the path of least resistance, of going along rather than standing up. And she made that habit comfortable. He had a choice. Every time she made a cutting comment in my direction and he looked at the floor, he made that choice over and over for 2 years. That's on him. But here's what I also know. People can change. Not always, not automatically, but they can. The Caleb who sat at my kitchen table last month and looked at those refinished floors and said, "Dad, these are incredible." That wasn't performance. I've known that kid since before he could read. I know what his real voice sounds like. It was in there. The hardest part of this whole situation wasn't the court date. It wasn't even packing up and leaving a house I'd owned for 20 years. It was the period in between. The weeks when I didn't know if my son was going to come through the other side of this, as someone I could know again. That uncertainty was the actual cost. Everything else, the legal fees, the logistics, the lamp left on its side in the middle of the floor like a small act of spite. All of that was just noise. What I learned, and I mean really learned in the way you only learn things through living them, is that dignity isn't a personality trait. It's a practice. You maintain it actively or you don't have it. I'd stopped maintaining it somewhere in that first year. Let it get crowded out by the daily work of keeping the household calm. When I picked it back up, when I sat in Philip's office and started talking through the sequence, I felt it return almost physically, like straightening up after you've been hunched for too long. The workshop helped. It always has. There's something about restoring a piece of furniture that teaches you the same lesson every time. The damage is not the final condition. The painted-over surface is not what the wood actually is. You have to be willing to do the slow work of getting back to what was there before someone covered it up. Caleb is doing that work now. So am I. What we're building isn't the same as what we had before all this. It can't be. That version is gone. But maybe that's all right. Maybe what's underneath once we get there is worth the effort of finding out. I hope so. I'm going to keep